I want to make it abundantly clear. I don't care that a person chooses to transition. My issue is this equaling out of genders to the degree of making it unfair for biological women to compete in women's sports. Pretend that there was another gender. Let's say there was male, female, and then something else that was bigger than male. Would I, as a male, want to compete in a league of cavemen? No. Get those Neanderthals out of here. Guys, you're looking at the thumbnail, you're looking at the title of the video, y'all already know what time it is. It is time to get active. Guys, very interesting discussion here today, but I think that it is appropriate to bring to this platform right here, okay? Oftentimes we go over the detriments of feminism in this quest to equalize the sexes irrespective of the biological differences between the sexes. We currently have this swimmer who was born a biological man that is now competing as a woman who has been involved in an ongoing debate because she is currently competing against women at the highest level, and she's smoking these women and wants to compete in the NCAA championships. If you're not familiar with the story, watch this clip that I put together in order to get you up to speed.
Cynthia Millen has spent 3 decades as a U.S. swimming official, but she has just resigned in protest over transgender swimmer Lia Thomas of the University of Pennsylvania, who is a biological male that has been allowed to compete against females. Thomas is now dominating swimming events and setting records. In her resignation letter, Millen simply said she, quote, can't support this, and that, quote, everything fair about swimming is being destroyed. Cynthia Millen joins me now. Cynthia, listen, thank you for joining me on the show, and thank you for your bravery. I guess I'm just curious, what kind of response have you gotten since you resigned from your position?
At first when he said bravery, my initial was damn, we live in a society where we have to be brave in order to speak about scientific truths. But what he actually means is bravery for resigning. She was a swimming official for 30 years, but because of what is allowed now today, she just can't stand for it. Okay. So anyway, let's hear her thoughts.
Sean, thanks very much. I've gotten a lot of kind comments from fellow officials, former officials, and from parents of swimmers and swimmers. The fact is that swimming is a sport in which bodies compete against bodies. Identities do not compete against identities.
Bars.
And from the very beginning, when you start out as an age grouper, swimmers are divided by sex and by age group, 8 and under, 9, 10, etc., all the way up, because from the very beginning, swimming, USA Swimming recognizes that boys swim differently from girls. And this is just accentuated when boys and girls go through puberty. Boys will always have larger lung capacity, larger hearts, greater circulation, a bigger skeleton, and less fat. Girls go through puberty and they have a double whammy. They not only grow breasts and hips, but they have periods, and they often have a totally different center of gravity. They have to learn how to swim over again. So while Lia Thomas is a child of God, he is a biological male who is competing against women, and no matter how much testosterone suppression drugs he takes, he will always be a biological male and have this advantage. And it's horrible. The statement for women then is, you don't matter. What you do is not important. And little girls are going to be thrown under the bus by all of this. He's going to be destroying women's swimming.
What I find so interesting about that is you could tell this is a woman that has come under intense scrutiny, because notice what she said, as a child of God. Because a lot of what the arguments is because you have a problem with this, then you don't consider them as human, or you consider them subhuman. So she's understanding those arguments and catching it and saying, while these are the facts, as a child of God, thus negating the idea that she's formed some type of prejudice of people like the swimmer, or like she's transphobic or something like that. For all you conversationalists out there, take note. That's how you get up in front of the argument. But let's proceed.
So I started my
This is the swimmer.
Transition period in May of 2019. That's when I started hormone replacement therapy. which is the medical transition for trans people.
It's medical.
For trans women, it's a combination of estrogen and testosterone blockers, which basically gives you female puberty, and you see fat redistribution, muscle loss, facial changes, all that. And so I started that.
What is it like to go into a competition against a transgender athlete when you know the outcome ahead of time?
Right.
Yeah, it's extremely deflating. I've experienced it 5 times, and each time I lost to a biological male. And the fact that that's still happening, that women are still losing to biological males in their own sport, shows why we need more female athletes to speak up about this.
While Lia Thomas hasn't had gender-affirming surgery, he did have a year's worth of, I believe, hormonal treatment, which is what the NCAA requires in many situations. But Madison, it doesn't change the biological fact that he's a man. He went through puberty as a man. He has muscle,
Yes.
structure, and everything through 22 years of his life as a man. And Madison.
Now, before we get into the actual race right here, I wanted to juxtapose what the trans athlete was saying versus one of the trans athlete competitors. You heard it there. Only been taking hormones for about a year and now wants to compete, has gone through puberty as a man and now wants to compete as a woman because that's how they identify, even though the body composition is completely different, especially just a year after taking those hormones. But you see it right there, the impact that it has on other competitors, women competitors that have gone their entire lives training for this sport and event and having it ripped out from under them because of how someone identifies, highlighted by the equalization of the genders, pushed by feminists. Let's get into the race. That's the trans athlete right there, Lia Thomas. Lia Thomas is done. Seconds later. For those unfamiliar with swimming, 40 seconds is a huge amount. Now, some of you guys might be saying, well, MTR, why are you bringing this up right now? Well, it recently came out in an article that this trans athlete is most likely to be eligible for the NCAA championships. Let's review that article. The NCAA last week said it will not adopt a new USA swimming policy requiring transgender athletes to provide evidence that a competitive advantage over cisgender athletes does not exist. I'm gonna just go over the cliff notes of this as it's a decently sized article. I'm gonna leave a link to this down in the description box down below so you guys can read over this yourself. The University of Pennsylvania's Lia Thomas, the transgender swimmer at the center of the heated national debate on whether an individual's participation on sports teams should align with their gender identity, will likely be ruled eligible to compete in next month's NCAA championships, despite more stringent guidelines for trans athletes adopted by the sport's governing body earlier this month. In a news release, the NCAA said it would not be adopting the U.S. swimming policy because implementing additional changes at this time could have unfair and potentially detrimental impact on schools and student athletes intending to compete in the NCAA Women's Swimming Championships. So essentially they're saying is that there's not enough time to do a correct assessment, so we're going to leave it as is right now so we don't destroy the fabric of the sport, because although this is a story that we're going over, this issue impacts schools all across the country, not even just in swimming, but in other sports as well. Shit, we've gone over a bunch of times and have talked specifically about why that should not be happening. But you have these non-combat sports as well, which of course is going to lag a little bit more because there's less urgency to change rules or policies because no one essentially is getting hurt, at least physically. Emotionally is a bit different of a story. I can only imagine, as hard as, you know, these athletes that work so hard within their lives to achieve at the highest, at the pinnacle level, being up against someone else with different physical advantages than you. It's almost like, pretend that there was another gender. Let's say there was male, female, and then something else that was bigger than male. Would I, as a male, want to compete in a league of cavemen? No. Get those Neanderthals out of here. They're built different. They have different chemicals flowing throughout their bodies. You understand that? Like, no. You're going to tell me that like 50% of the caveman population can bench press 500 pounds? Why would you want to include my ass, right? My developed ass in a league with these goddamn freaks of nature? Why would you want to put men who on average are 5'10" against these Neanderthals that are on average 6'12" together to compete in combat sports? To me, it just makes absolutely no sense fundamentally, but we must continue to talk about it, because without the criticism, this would go on and on and on, and there would be no platforms to criticize or to give feedback for unfairness within society today. I want to make it abundantly clear. I don't care that a person chooses to transition. Do whatever it is that you want to do. My issue is this equaling out of genders to the degree of making it unfair for biological women to compete in women's sports. And this here is just another data point to demonstrate how topsy-turvy our world has gotten without feedback, criticism, and critique. Questions, comments, concerns? God already know what to do. Mediocre tutorials and reviews at gmail.com. Do you guys agree? Do you disagree? Leave your feedback for me down in the comment box down below. I have a feeling that the comments are going to go crazy on this one. Last but not least, I got a Patreon. If you support my message and you want my positions to continue to rise, continue to support your homie. Link down in the description box down below. Let's get it popping. Until next time, YouTube.